You are listening to Lifestyle Blueprints, discussions to help build a life of your own design. My name is Josh Hoskins. Welcome to the show. Okay, so we are off the heels of a pretty epic weekend here at Legendary. We covered this last weekend, we checked out the Waste Management Phoenix Open, which was amazing, okay? If you're not familiar with how the Open actually goes, I mean, it's a pretty nationally recognized event at this point, but it's one of the biggest golf tournaments in the country. Swarms of people come here where we're based out in Scottsdale for it. And it is everything that you might typically associate with the sport of golf, like things like posh, high society, calm, boring, things like that. Total reverse at the Open. It's parties all over. Everyone's having a good time. Everyone's partying. Everyone's drinking. A lot of really crazy and wild things happen there. And we got to be a part of all of it. We got access to some pretty cool areas, got to network with some awesome people, and it was a really phenomenal time. And then on top of that, we also rapidly turned heel and went over to Tucson, one city down south in Arizona. And we went to a festival called Gem and Jam that we were invited to go cover. And that was amazing as well. Almost kind of like a mini Burning Man. Crazy cool stuff. There was this DJ called Sack Squatch, which was this guy who dressed up in a full-on Bigfoot costume, a convincing one too, and plays the saxophone with EDM beats. And there's also tons of cool stuff there too. You can check out what both of those events were like on legendarylifemedia.com. Also follow our YouTube channel, follow our social media, especially Instagram. That's where a lot of that content goes. If you're interested in lifestyle experiences and how that looks, definitely check that out. But I'll probably talk about those more in depth later. What I really wanted to talk about today, actually, was something that I was thinking about after I attended PSI Basic, which is part of the PSI seminar program. It stands for Personal Success Institute. It's this self-development company that's been around for decades, like 50 years or something like that. And it was actually really cool. I enjoyed it. I actually went off the recommendation of a friend, and it was definitely like a lot of basics, a lot of fundamentals, but really good refreshers and executed very well. It was also very beautiful in a way because a lot of the other people who were there were people that came from like recovery programs. And this is the kind of experience that's perfect for beginners, but especially people coming from that kind of background, because it does a really good job of helping people get excited about life again. And it also is pretty effective self-development. It's a lot of meditation exercises, hands-on exercises, like personality type analysis, a lot of real-time feedback from both their like coaches that they have there, their speakers, as well as the other people that are in the groups they assign to you, things like that. And it was actually a really cool, impactful event. I'm really happy I went. I'll probably go back kind of as a plug for them. Something that's really cool about their organization is if you go to any one of their seminars, because they have a few different like levels. I went to the first one to check it out. But if you go to any one of their seminars, you get unlimited free access to the rest of them in perpetuity. So it's a plug for PSI Basic. If you're someone and you're interested in a actually solid self-development seminar that can really change your life, check out PSI. All of that said, ironically, something that I started thinking about after that was something that I call the self-development junkie. Someone who is really dialed in to all of the latest self-development messaging. They read all the books. They've definitely seen all the YouTube videos. They've maybe even gone to a seminar. They've probably gone to a lot of webinars. They know the lingo. They've learned all about all like the internal stuff and the work ethic stuff and the manifestation stuff and the, atomic habits stuff. And that's all great. I mean, that's all amazing, but something that I think is a very common trap. And I've been wanting to speak about this for a while. I've kind of had an itch because I think it's something that's important to note, especially for people who have been in the self-development scene for a while. This is a very common state of affairs, is you end up over time often getting a high, so to speak, off of the experience of feeling like you're getting an answer to a question or feeding invalidating the identity of yourself as someone who is improving, you get a high more off of that than you do actual improvement, which is a problem. If you are in a state where you are finding that you're stuck, like you have things that you want to do, maybe you have certain areas that you're trying to become more successful in, maybe it's your personal finances or your business or your social skills, your ability to network, maybe it's resolving some kind of inner trauma, maybe it's getting better at a hobby, maybe it's your fitness, maybe you're trying to dial in your health, maybe you're trying to get a little bit better with the way you eat and how often you exercise. Could be any number of things, could be trying to travel more. Whatever area of life you're trying to excel in, if you find yourself spending more time looking at improvement content or self-development content, and it's less so in proportion to the amount of action you're taking, that's a sign that you might be a self-help junkie. And here's the thing, like, it's something that I think is almost a rite of passage for a lot of people. And it makes sense, right? Because a lot of people who get into self-development, and this, of course, is not a blanket rule. I'm sure there's exceptions to this rule, but at the same time, the exception proves the rule. Most people who get into self-development didn't originally get there from a place of abundance necessarily. Usually it's people who are in a dark place in their life. And I'm using the word dark very broadly. You don't necessarily have to be like coming from the depths of some terrible situation. It could just be there's a part of your life where you know you have a deficiency and it's bugging you on a deep level. And that's usually what stirs people to get involved in self-development type content. You know, if you are having deep issues building your business or getting advancement in your profession, you might go to someone like Gary Vee or Alex Hormozy or something, and that becomes your go-to guru, and that's how you get started with a lot of their funnels and their processes. Or maybe it's fitness, and that gets you into, you know, the Jeff Cavaliers or the Derek More Plates More Dates of the world, or the V-Shred. It could be like any, or it could just be general motivation and inspiration that gets you into Tony Robbins. And nothing against any of those guys. I think most of, not all of their content's amazing. But because of that fact, because most people get into self-development from that place of lack, there's a very, very real possibility and trap that if you rely too much on that kind of content to feed your identity as someone who is enabled and is improving themselves and is being proactive, and that becomes a identity in your mind that you continuously build through the consumption of that content, you can end up almost like Pavlov's dog, developing a dopamine response to the feeling of you feeling like you're improving rather than the actual improvement itself. So I'm really passionate about that. And it's also part of why I'm really passionate about what we're doing at Legendary Life Media. Again, you should check out legendarylifemedia.com, subscribe to our newsletter. The reason why is because with Legendary, I mean, me and my co-founder Brandon, you know, we are very well versed in the self-development culture. And part of what we wanted to do was build a media platform that does not only provide like that self-development, internal mindset, discipline, manifestation, so on and so forth content that is very important. I think especially for bringing people out of apathy if they are in a dark situation, vital. And it's always worth revisiting if you're rusty on the fundamentals, because you always need to be refreshing those no matter how long you're in the game, so to speak. But it's also equally important to hold your feet to the fire by showing here's the kind of lifestyle you should expect if you're actually taking your internal work seriously in a way that produces results with you engaging with the real world. If you're someone who is really trying to improve their health, maybe, you know, go to the gym more, eat healthier, like here's the kind of body you should expect to have, or at least be closer to, if you're taking that seriously and you're actually taking action toward it. Same thing with wealth, same thing with travel, same thing with luxury experiences, same thing with music experiences you can have, same thing with becoming financially independent, same thing with entrepreneurship. If those are areas where you're trying to improve and you're doing all the manifestation and all the meditation and you're watching all the Eckhart Tolle videos and all the Anthony Robbins videos and all the Alex Hormozy videos, but you're not making any real progress, it's probably because you're some kind of form of self-development junkie. And that's probably what's keeping you stuck if you feel stuck, as you've developed a reliance on the feeling of improvement rather than actually improving. So that's something that I think a lot of people, if not everyone who gets into the self-development world, kind of at some point can relate with. But luckily, it's pretty easy to get out of it. And the way that you get out of it, in my experience, and the way I've experienced other people do it, is really hold yourself accountable to performing action, even if it's menial, tiny 0.00001% progress tasks. Just dedicate yourself to doing something real for your goal every single day. Another good thing to do is, as far as it's possible, have a good ratio weighted towards action versus consumption of content. And what I mean by that is, for every hour of self-development content consumption in whatever area you're trying to improve, you should have at least 5 hours of action. It should be a 5-to-1 ratio. In fact, that's really the only way that the self-development content will even be effective, because if you are stacking information on top of information through content consumption, and you're not performing any action to help your nervous system embody it, you're not even giving your mind enough time to properly process the information. So it should be a 5-to-1 ratio of action to inspiration or content consumption or self-development absorption, right? Now, something I want to say, because there is a counter argument to that, fully aware of this. A good counter argument is, well, what if I am choosing between some kind of mainstream slop content or self-development content? If it's the choice between those two, I should just choose the self-development content. So why are you getting on me for consuming too much self-development content? Look, if those are your only two options, then I agree. Okay. Now, I'm going to also give another caveat here, because I also think people are a little bit overly critical of mainstream entertainment. I think there actually is a lot of value in things like fiction and good stories where the creators, the writers, the producers have actually spent some of their own life force infusing a good moral and message and value in that story. There are people who say that reading fiction is completely useless, and I totally disagree with that on a fundamental level. That said, there is such a thing as slop, and 80% of what's out there is slop. And if your choice is only between consuming that slop and consuming self-development content or things that really inspire you, then yeah, choose the inspirational stuff. Absolutely. No argument there. But that is, from what I've seen, 9 times out of 10, always a false dichotomy. You can always be doing something that moves you further toward your actual goal if you're in that mindset that is oriented towards goal fulfillment and personal growth. That's just the truth. You're always able to do something. And it's really not so much about cutting down on self-development content at the end of the day, as it is about lessening the grip of that craving for validation of being someone who improves. Because if you're coming from a place of lack in the very beginning, it's really easy to get hooked on that feeling of validation. It's so easy, especially if you have felt for a period in your life in any area that there was some hopelessness, that you felt like there was no way out of the rut you were in, or maybe you just had an identity where you felt like other people were cut from a different cloth than you and that you just never really had a chance categorically to succeed to the levels of others. And then you discover what's really possible, often through a lot of the self-help gurus, regardless of your opinion on them. That is something that they help people do, rise out of apathy. And once you get that initial hit of hope, really, what do the kids call it? Hopium. Once you get that initial hit of hope, it can be really tempting to kind of get addicted to that, in so much that you care more about the actual feeling again of progressing, or just feeling like you're progressing through the acquisition of new knowledge or acquisition of new concepts around how to improve. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing any actual improvement or putting any of that into practice, you are almost just as, you're still in the same place that you were before. You just feel a little bit better about it. And I don't think that's the kind of success anyone wants. That's not the kind of success I want. I don't want the kind of success where I feel amazing about how I'm doing and I feel great on a surface level, but I'm not making any true progress, which means on the deepest, corest, most true part of myself, I know that I'm not living up to my potential. That's not the kind of success that I want, okay? I don't think it's the kind of success anyone wants. I think people just, it is a tall task to bring yourself into a higher state of what I would call anyway, a higher state of consciousness. If you're not used to doing that, it's really tough. It's very taxing. So it's no surprise that people can get hooked on self-development and become self-development junkies in that way. But you have to move past it. If you're someone who's really trying to improve, you need to understand that while it may have been helpful for a time, the nonstop repeat self-development books and self-improvement podcasts, they actually at this point could be hindering you more than they're helping you. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't, in general, with the content you do consume and the influences you do have on yourself, skew towards things that inspire you. Of course you should do that. But what I'm saying is don't rely on it. Don't become someone who is all talk and no action. Because who likes people who are all talk and no action? They're my least favorite kind of people, honestly. I'd rather someone be authentically a lazy piece of garbage than be a fake motivated person. No joke. Like, I don't like lukewarm people. I have a real resentment toward them. If I'm being real. Very real disdain. Sorry. But hey, I mean, that's just the landscape sometimes. That's just the way that the process of development goes. So that's just my thought on self-development junkies, self-help junkies. Hopefully it was helpful to you. Think of a few different ways you can take action today or this week. Whatever your goal is. If you're going to the gym, instead of listening to fitness advice for 3 hours straight before and after the gym, why not just cut that down a little bit and put more conscious focus onto your actual workout, things like that. And those little 1% improvements might seem like nothing, but I guarantee you over time it compounds. And being able to, again, it's not so much about the sheer volume and the exact number of minutes or whatever that you're spending consuming content versus not. It's really more about the internal shift of, do I care about feeling like I'm successful or do I care about actually being successful? And once you make that shift, that's when you move from someone who is kind of in an intermediate territory to someone who is actually on their way to becoming the elite. You're on your way to becoming the 1%. So yeah, that is pretty much, I think, all I got. That's all I got. I'm going to make next episode about some of the cool stuff that we experienced at Gem and Jam and a WMPO this weekend. And I also have some cool insights about RAS that I'm going to talk about next time too. But until then, this has been Josh Hoskins with Lifestyle Blueprints. See you on the next episode. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, ring the little notification bell, and I will see you on the next episode. Peace.